Welcome to the Futurebuild Podcast, your trusted space for exploring the voices, ideas, and solutions shaping a better built environment. I'm Martin Hurn, Event Director of Futurebuild, and today we're tackling one of the most critical questions facing our industry. How do we deliver homes that are generally fit for the future? I'm joined by Elaine Toogood, Senior Director of Concrete at the MPA, and one of the UK's leading champions for sustainable, resilient design. Elaine is an architect by training, and for the past 15 years, she's helped guide the UK construction community on how to design, specify, and use concrete responsibly, including the shift to low-carbon solutions. She's the editor of Concrete Quarterly, a frequent author and speaker, and a driving force on working groups ranging from the DEFRA Flood Resilience Plan to the London Climate Ready Partnership. In this episode, we'll unpack the urgent issues she raised in her recent opinion piece, Housing 2025. The people have spoken, from how many of us don't know what our homes are really made of, to why we're in danger of sleepwalking into a generation of homes that aren't fit for purpose. We'll take building safety, long-term performance, low-carbon innovation, and why sustainability must be owned not just by those who build our homes, but the people that live in them. If you care about resilience, future-ready design, and what it really takes to get the right materials in the right place, this is a conversation you don't want to miss. Elaine, fantastic to have you on the podcast today.
I'm really pleased to be here.
Great. I always start off by sort of trying to find out sort of what got you into the built environment and in particular sustainability. Obviously, you're an architect by trade as well.
Yeah, I am. Although as growing up, I never had a burning desire to be an architect. I went into architecture because it meant I could learn about everything. It was history and geography and science and art, and I wanted to learn and do everything. So, but I do remember the exact point that I thought, you know what, I'm into this architecture bit. And it sounds a bit sad, but it was revising for an exam about how to design and fix precast concrete cladding panels. So maybe my sort of future career in concrete was sort of set from an early stage, But I suppose the sustainability bit, as a young architect, one of my formative jobs was with Short & Associates, and we were designing, huge university buildings using thermal mass. We were looking at how that could be used to reduce the energy of buildings. And that was a real inspiration for me working there. I learned I've always been into materials, but I learned about how materials play a really important role in the performance of a building. I mean, it sort of sounds obvious, but actually people don't always make the link between sort of environment and energy efficiency and choice of materials. And that was, that's a long time ago now, but I think that really set the scene, built my foundations, if you like, for by interest in particularly concrete, but it's used within sustainability and sustainable design.
And when did the change come? I've had a lot of architects on the podcast that have sort of, spent their time in practice, but have moved on and gone into different consultant roles and, or lobbying roles as well. Yeah. And sort of, what was that tipping point for you?
It was, well, as I said, I sort of ended up being an architect. It wasn't a burning desire, but I was always interested in the built environment. It's a little bit of happenstance. I saw an advert for the Concrete Centre and I thought, ooh, that looks interesting. What's that about? Didn't know anything about it. And said, can you tell me a bit more? And they went, oh, thank you for your application. and the rest is history. It's fascinating to be able to use all those skills that you have as an architect, but to apply them in a different way and to be useful to creating a better built environment, but not necessarily to be the one at the drawing board, but to be supporting the ones that's not drawing boards anymore, is it, obviously, but supporting people who are making the decisions and helping shape policy and there's so much to learn, there's so much to do, particularly now for sustainability. It's a really fast evolving subject and really important. That's what I love about this job, and I think that I can't speak for others, obviously, but you can almost make more of an impact by doing something that's not, trying to produce and help get a building over the line that it's going to take 3 or 4, 5 or even longer years. And yeah, it's...
So those that don't know you, tell us about your current role. What that entails.
Good question. So I'm senior director of concrete at the Mineral Products Association. So that's the trade association for pretty much all the minerals that are produced within the UK. It's all the cement, good amount of the concrete, all the stuff that goes into making concrete, like cement and aggregates. But specifically within there, I'm director of the Concrete Centre, and the Concrete Centre is a organisation that provides technical guidance for architects, engineers, anybody within the built environment who wants to understand how to use concrete, how to use concrete better. We provide a whole range of resources to enable people to do that. And then we've got our product groups who are experts in their own field. So masonry, people forget that masonry is concrete, concrete blocks, precast, ready-mix concrete. And we also have an organisation called UK Concrete, and that's very much about why we'd be using concrete, and promoting the benefits of fire resilience and wider sustainability benefits as well. And so part of the role, it's a long answer because there's a lot of work going on, but part of the role within UK Concrete is that we've been developing and are in charge of the UK Concrete Sustainability Strategy. It's been going for 15 years. So this is the industry collecting and measuring and making progress on a whole range of different sustainability credentials. And that was launched the year I joined, and there's no coincidence there. I was really impressed with what the industry were about to embark on, and it was one of the reasons why I joined. I've got a strong green streak in me, and so I was impressed with that, and that's been going on for ages. And so that's part of the role as well, is that we collect the data to demonstrate what good work the industry is doing across a whole range of different, not just carbon, but circular economy issues, resource efficiency, support for biodiversity.
Let's pick up on that, because I vaguely remember that roadmap coming out. So I'll give away my age as well. Yeah. But when that was launched, and that was a huge thing. And I think what I've been impressed about is probably the progress that you've made as an industry across that as well. And I'd love to sort of delve into maybe sort of the shifts in that communication over those 15 years and really sort of how concrete's been viewed, especially around, a term like sustainability as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a much misused term, isn't it? I think I'd say probably the last 15 years has been a real focus on that from within the built environment, in terms of not just the built environment. It's needed everywhere, isn't it? So when I joined, I say so 15 years, most of the questions that we were being asked was about thermal mass, right? Use of concrete to reduce the need for mechanical cooling and energy efficiency. And all this other work was going on that the industry were doing in terms of measuring and reporting against sustainability factors. We would tell people about it, but there wasn't a pull. People weren't really interested. We given guidance about sustainable low carbon concrete and lower carbon, how to do that through specification. But actually there wasn't really a market for it. People were like, embodied carbon has become the big shift. Yeah. I would say, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. It's been almost like the number one thing that we get asked questions about, and we're providing guidance about. And that is really important and good, actually, because it means that there is becoming much more of a demand for the lower carbon concretes that have always been able to be produced, but there was never a market for them. But it also means that the industry strategy and the roadmap that it has for decarbonisation. We've been talking about sustainability for a very long time. The industry's been decarbonising for decades. We sort of launched a combined cement and concrete roadmap for decarbonisation in 2019, and that demonstrates, I think, 53% of carbon emissions since 1990 when they first started measuring and collecting that data. So, making good progress, but it's still loads to do.
No. I think what I always sort of applaud the concrete industry for is the sort of the transparency and data-led approach as well. And I know, like life cycle assessments and trying to get a standardised measure has always been key to that as well. You've never hidden behind, anything, and I think that's been great to see.
Yeah, well, it's important not to.
Yeah.
Because data, transparency, we've all got to be understanding and learning. And if you're going to compare and learn, you've got to know what you're looking at. It's hugely important. Yeah. And I think we've worked hard to help support members as well in terms of, provision of EPDs.
Yeah.
There's we're producing that sector average EPDs, because you need verified data. You need to have some standardization of knowing what you measure to be able to enable designers, architects, clients make informed decisions. And that's really important for concrete, because it's not necessarily people don't instinctively think, oh, well, I'm going to go for concrete, it's going to be the lower carbon option, because they hear about the global figures. But actually, when you start looking at verified data and you measure properly, it's quite a different picture at a project level, and that's hugely important. So we've all got to get better at measuring.
Yeah.
But no, it's as I said, it was one of the reasons why I was very happy to join and be part of the industry, because I was impressed with that commitment to sustainability and understanding its own impacts, actually.
And you mentioned the word air impact loads, and I think the publications and reports and guidance that you've given have made a huge impact. And I think
I hope so.
Well, you're dealing with a very informed audience, aren't we? It's sort of, as engineers and architects and contractors, we are carbon literate. Or getting more carbon literate as an industry, but but I suppose the shift we're seeing now is it's now being talked at board level, or we're going to come on to it in a minute, the report you did at a consumer or homeowner level as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. There is always a danger that we, in London or sustainability groups or, those people that engage with Futurebuild, that we might be in a little bit of a bubble.
I think you're right.
That actually we think everybody else gets it. But they don't, and it's still, you ask a lot of people about what sustainability means, at planning level, somewhere else in the country, and, it's still about energy, and and embodied carbon isn't there, or let alone all the other considerations, that are evolving through circular economy. It's all coming through, but I think that there's still a lot of learning. We've been doing quite a lot of work with the Future Homes Hub recently, and they've been actively trying to actively been developing a tool to try to encourage house builders to engage with whole life carbon, and hugely important, of course, especially with building loads of homes, and that and the development of that tool is intended to be able to say, well, to make it easy to upskill many people rather than just those that are already engaged with it, and maybe have somebody who can do a life cycle analysis on the books. This is new learning. This is a new layer of requirements of thinking about construction that we've never needed to deal with, or people haven't engaged with before. And so there's still a lot of it. So I agree, there's a lot that people that know what they're doing. I think there's still a lot of people that don't. And there's a big job still to do, I think, on upskilling and facilitating and collecting and sharing data.
It's taking that best practice and disseminating it, isn't it? Why?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I love about what we do, is that it's trying to do that. It's to say what works and go, well, okay, so you made that work. Well, let's can we just tell everybody? And so I like to think, and we get good feedback. People do come to us and say, oh, that was really good. We might get hundreds of people turning up on our webinars asking questions because they're engaged with it and they want to know, and that's really gratifying.
So I've had the silver bullet for low carbon concrete, but you stress the importance of sort of up-to-date data, especially when you're choosing the right material for the right job. Love you just to expand on that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, there was a recent report that came out from Future Homes Hub. Their latest report says there is no silver bullet for decarbonising housing, and which it's a really significant moment, because I think that's very different. Basically, this report compared 3 typical house constructions for the way the built homes are made. So cavity wall construction, 2 of them were with a blockwork inner leaf and one's with a timber inner leaf. Now, similar sort of exercise that they did a few years ago said, you know what, if you want to decarbonise, you need to swap out that masonry for timber. You're going to get loads of savings. This report, based on new data, a wider data set, actually they came out and goes, you know what, actually not much difference. That isn't the area that you need to be focusing on. Now that goes against quite a lot of people's perceptions and actually potentially some policy decisions that have been made that assumes that timber is going to be a lower carbon solution. But actually, there's more data available. It's really important that we get the right data, that's measured properly, that we're upskilled enough to be able to know which data to use. Because when you do, you realise that actually at a project level, it's not, you can't just make that assumption. It often isn't the case. Concrete can provide you with either, maybe there's not much difference in it, or maybe even can be a lower carbon solution. And now that is really significant because we could be making, really uninformed decisions and saying, you know what, we've got to get rid of the way we do things. We've got to get rid of that block work. We're going to get rid of all that tried and tested performance from a structural and fire and, locally made and the industry that supports. We're going to swap that out for something new. But if you were doing it because you thought it was the lowest carbon solution, then actually you're not doing it for the right reasons. So data is absolutely essential for us to be able to make informed decisions so that we're not, having knee-jerk reactions to the solution. We've got to delve into it and really understand it so that we're making that we're building materials, we're building our homes in the right way, and we're not making ill-informed decisions about the best thing to do.
And so what's lacking at the moment?
Data's the key.
I could say, what's lacking then at the moment in data? Is it a consistency of measurement?
Yeah, I think there is a bit of that. I think that there's, we've been very supportive of providing EPDs, but there's still not a lot out there. There's still not a lot of consistency with regards to the quality of the data, and I think there's also inconsistency with how it's used. So, for example, concrete, people might just look at the list and just go at one without realising there's lots of different types of concrete.
Right, yeah.
Right? And so they just go, I'll go with that one. Oh, that's made in America. That'll be appropriate, won't it? No, you use the local one. It's usually going to be made in the UK. Or it's a different type of concrete rather than, so I think, it's two things. It's consistent data, comparable, verified quality of data, but also then the skills of being able to know what the right data is to be using for a specific job. And the Future Homes Hub, for housing in particular, have been doing a lot of work on this and creating this simple tool for that, which I think is going to be really useful for the engaging home building industry, the house building industry, with measurement of whole life carbon, because that's the right measure. It's not just the upfront; it needs to be the whole life to get a true measure of the impacts of a building.
So yeah, I've had my head sort of a bit focused. We've got a whole retrofit section of the show, but I think, I think having you on today completely reminded me actually of, the government have huge ambitions on new homes being built here. They've thrown out this, 1.55 million homes. And what I want to bring onto is the fascinating piece of research you've done, sort of almost, on the back of that challenge around sort of, what's holding up our homes, the whole, trying to get the perception from the homeowner, actually. And I know you've done a piece of research, surveyed 5,000 people. I'd love to go and sort of talk about some of the key findings from that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we thought housing is really important, right? As you said, there's a big push to get a lot of houses built. We need them. But we were really interested to find out what is it that people want from their homes, and do people know what their homes are built out of? And actually, what that research showed, this is some work that was carried out by Optimium, and they surveyed, as you said, 5,000 new homeowners, range of different housing types, and low rise and high rise. And what came out of that is that the building performance was hugely important. quality, hugely important. Something like 89% were really concerned about, the importance of fire resilience, so their buildings needed to be made out of materials that were going to be fire resilient. And yet I think it was something like only 14% were aware or received any information about what their homes were actually made out of when they bought or moved in to their new properties. Now that is a big disconnect, isn't it? I mean, why do we not know what our homes are made out of?
I suppose this is coming because we build homes to look like traditional homes.
Often, yes.
But it could be brick slips on a timber frame building, for example.
Yeah, and we look at and we all do it. How do we categorise a building? What it looks like.
Yeah.
It's brick on the outside. It's a brick building. But actually, the structure is usually hidden. Yeah. So it's behind there. So most homes actually in England, new homes that are built, are all made out of concrete. Now most people can't get their head around that, in my experience. That's concrete block work. Yeah. That's what we're talking about. And, so that's the way we build. But it's hidden behind layer of insulation and an external skin. But those bones of the building, that concrete block, is a really essential part of providing a home. It's long-term performance, but we don't see it. So we don't recognise it, or maybe we don't value it. There's a really interesting, and yet we should. Yeah. And anybody who's, we were talking before we started about, DIY and extensions to your homes and things like that. And actually anybody, when you start doing that, that's when you start like knocking things about and you're like, oh my God, what? There's hollow in there, or the ability to be able to cut through and knock through and adapt our homes to meet our changing needs. That's actually going to be impacted by how that home is built. Yeah. And are we thinking enough about that? I don't think we are. I don't think homeowners are aware, but I also think that there's a real issue there with sort of impact on policy as well.
Well, I was going to ask about that. Sort of, where does that material choice, lie? Obviously, it's traditionally done at a sort of a specification level or a house builder level. It's not being driven, is it, by the consumer? But I suppose what you're saying, what you found in the report is actually maybe the homeowner should have more of a say, or they, if they're better informed, they'd value homes in a different way.
I think you're right. I think it's about being better informed about what a home is made out of, and all buildings actually, but also recognizing the value in what it's made out of and what that can bring to the long-term performance of a home. I mean, quite apart from your thermal comfort and acoustics and all those things that are really important to energy efficiency. Obviously that's different. Energy efficiency, there's been a big move to that with the providing EPCs at the point of sale, but actually why isn't there a climate change performance certificate at the point of sale? I mean, that would be a game changer, wouldn't it? People are knowing with that huge investment that they're making that actually, how's their home going to perform in a changing environment? How's it going to perform, with regards to risk of overheating or a wildfire or flooding? And actually they should know that, should care. I think they do care, but I just don't think they've made the connection and they don't know what homes are made out of.
I suppose the government have got real challenges at the moment, haven't they? Because they are trying to massively scale up house building. And I suppose, wrongly or rightly, they've seen innovation as a route of doing that. Yeah. And so, when we talk about innovation, we look at, whether it's modular homes, volumetric solutions, which are traditionally light steel frame or timber. There are precast, obviously, on that side. Or we start to look at timber frame homes because, speed of build, on that side as well. And then I suppose there's a perception that sort of, traditional masonry built homes is a sort of it's a traditional building method. It's a skilled labour as well.
Yeah. And there's a desire to do things differently. On the one hand, there's also a design, So yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there's a couple of things to unpack from there. What I would say is one is you're right. MMC, modern methods of construction. There's a sort of strange perception that actually that means timber and lightweight, but it doesn't. We have got a thriving, precast industry within the UK. So I guess it depends if we talk about low-rise housing or are we talking about sort of, apartment blocks where there's, there's a lot of excellent, good MMC construction going on, which is utilising the built-in concrete.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've got the acoustic benefits there as well.
But fire, of course,
absolutely,
is, hugely important when you're going up. But for low rise, you're right. Tends, maybe MMC with the timber, but actually, yes, we need lots of homes. We need quantity, and we need to build them now. But that doesn't mean building fast. Okay, but they've got to be built to last.
Yeah.
So if we're over focused on the sort of short term objectives, hugely important, but not at the expense of building a home that's quite frankly fit for the future.
Yeah.
And when I mean fit for the future, I'm talking about consideration of really important climate change impacts, because we know that they're here already, and they're not really accounted for within building regulations, and they're not properly yet managed within planning requirements. We need to be thinking about that.
I'd love to pick up on that point, because on the back of the research, you've written some amazing articles, and you did one for us as well in our newsletter. And if anyone hasn't read that, go back and look at it, Housing 2025 piece. But you made a great statement in that, which was, we're at risk of sleepwalking into a generation that homes that aren't fit for purpose. Yeah. I'd love you to unpack that.
Yeah, no, I am really quite concerned about this. I think that if we're not taking on board really key and recognised hazards as a result of climate change impacts, then we are not building a home that is going to be comfortable, appropriate, possibly even safe in the future. Now, that sounds a bit dramatic, okay? But actually, the UK GBC a couple of weeks ago launched their roadmap for climate change resilience. And I think there seems to me to be a shift. Mitigation, stopping climate change, hugely important. That's what the decarbonisation is all about. But we know that it's here. We've got to take on board. So we have to do both. And at the moment, there's the other half of that coin, the climate change adaptation and resilience, hasn't really had enough focus on it from my perspective. And this UK GBC roadmap is a really good piece of work, which is saying, you know what, we've got to be thinking about the hazards of overheating. We've just been experiencing, not too bad today, but we've been experiencing that overheating, drought, conversely also then flood, so not enough water, too much water at the wrong times, storms, but also wildfires.
Yeah.
And they've identified those as being 5 key hazards that we need to be considering as part of our to underpin the decisions that we make within the built environment. Absolutely.
And I think the big shift there is that we're seeing it firsthand in this country. It's no longer, we're filming now, and there's wildfires in Cyprus, and there was flash flooding in Spain, and then we talk about the big California fires as well. But we forget now, we had mass fires in the UK last year.
Yeah, absolutely.
We get huge flash floods now because of how the long periods of dry periods that we get. We're getting, I live on the Isle of Wight. We're getting unprecedented amounts of cliff erosion. And you're seeing it firsthand.
Yeah.
And I think that's the shift. And I wonder if that's what was sort of some of the views that were coming out in the surveys, because we see it firsthand and it's in the media as well.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. I think people are now, realizing that this is real and we need to be thinking about it. I think there's a few things there, isn't there, that we're not used to living in that sort of environment where in order to keep our buildings cool, we need to pull the curtains or pull the blinds down during the day. It's sort of and open the windows and let all that warm air in. It's counterintuitive to the way that we've been occupying our buildings within the UK for years. So we've all got a lesson to learn about how to, live in our buildings, as well as making sure that the buildings that we're building are appropriate and can enable us to live in what is, I guess, the shorthand is a more Mediterranean kind of climate. Yeah. But there's that shift in thinking, I think, is the bit that I'm concerned about. That if we don't think about those and we just go build them fast, don't care how they're built, let's just get them up to the minimum standards in building regulations, we're not going to be building homes that are going to be fit for the future, because they won't have taken on board those really important considerations about how to be comfortable in hot weather. You need thermal mass and ventilation. You've got to be able to get that, resilient to storms and flood. And wildfires, like you say, we know recently there's been a lot of focus on fires in higher rise and denser, but actually wildfires brings the risk of fires to the ground.
Well, let's talk about a little bit about, if I'm listening to this at the moment, I'm going, okay, what role does concrete have in all of this?
Why am I talking about this?
What role is, and how does that contribute to housing resilience? What's the practical steps? What would you like to see happen?
I mean, at one level, it's really easy, right? So we said concrete and blockwork masonry is usually the structure of the building, right? So that's a structure that doesn't rot, doesn't burn, doesn't rust, resilient to the impacts of water, stays strong, stays up there. It just inherently performs in those risks. Now, there's some little tweaks and things that you can do to make it even better, but you're inherently building in good bones from a climate resilience point of view, and that's And
in practical design terms, are we do we need to build our homes in a different way to be resilient? Do we need to bring back, I don't know, waterproof basements, for example, or deeper foundation? What's the sort of, the role there of?
Yeah, well, it depends, like anything, it depends a little bit. It depends on where you're building and what type of things you're building. I don't think that there necessarily needs to be a huge shift. If you're on the whole, we generally are not building in flood risks or floodplains, right? If you are, there is a whole school of thought that says we could and should be doing more of that because there are solutions. That's typically about raising up the properties out of the flood level.
Yeah.
But actually, there's a revision to the standard of how to build in flood resilience that was launched in March. I always forget the names. BS 85500, I think.
I've just got it as the BSI flooding standard.
Okay,
so
right. So, and in there, there's some. It's got some really excellent guidance about material selection and how to build. To upskill people in terms of what are the risks and hazards there. But it's got some. A couple of details in there that says, well, if there's surface water flooding, which is on the up. We know that there's more, as you said it earlier, there's more increased use of that, because, impacts of that with storms. But that does typically isn't picked up or within a flood risk zone. So you can be at risk of surface water flooding, but not labelled as being at risk of flooding. Okay, so it's not on your radar through the planning system. What the standard's got is a couple of details that says, well, this is typically how we build in the moment. So beam and block floor or concrete floor, masonry cavity wall insulation. And it says, that's going to be pretty good in terms of providing you with resilience to that. There's a couple of things that you can do, just making sure that waterproofing layer, maybe the DPM is a waterproofing layer rather than just a damp-proof membrane, or you just pay a little bit more attention to the details of the junctions, but not much. So it's not a fundamental shift for how we're building today to make some really significant improvements for house resilience. But what that means is sticking with the mineral-based, solid, good masonry that's going to do the job for you in the first place, rather than swapping out for something that actually isn't going to be resilient. And actually, the standard says if you're going to build it in MMC, you need to make sure that it is climate resilience, because that's not going to be something that's going to be offered to you as standard. And it makes that recommendation that you've got to make sure that it's been tested and proven that it can do it.
I was going to come on to that. We've mentioned the UK GBC resilience report or framework for resilience. Where's the opportunities, or I suppose where does that need to be now aligning with housing policy? Because as you've said before, we're an industry that builds to standard rather than goes beyond traditionally. I think that's changing in certain house builders and developers. But how do we bring some of this this into policy?
How do we bring it in? Well, we used to have the Code for Sustainable Homes, didn't we, of course, and that sort of petered out. Slightly replaced by the Home quality mark, but didn't quite get as much traction. And
No.
and I think so. Then I think something like that is required. I doubt if regulation is going to change anytime soon.
No, we've got a building safety act coming in. We've got a good homes
Yes, we do.
standard as well.
Yeah. Exactly. Future home standards coming through, but that's mainly focused on energy efficiency. Again, obviously hugely important, but it's the other aspects. So I know the Future Homes Hub are looking at some other metrics for measuring sustainability of housing, and for there to be a sort of a mark of meeting standards. But as I understand it, at the moment, it's not attached to the actual property. It's more about the credentials of the developer. And I think we need to be, there needs to be some policy. Ideally, there should be policy. There should be in building regulations, should be better enforced through planning. So I guess those are some, which ones are the easiest wins? I don't know. The UK GBC have made some really good recommendations within as part of that roadmap for what needs to be taken on board. But at a really simple level, I think, if you said it before, being market driven, people need to know what the homes are being made out of, know how they're going to perform, and then if the demand is there, they will be built like that. So that's about a market driven solution to how we actually create this.
Yeah, and I think it was
resolve it.
It was clear from the research, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah, it really was. Yeah. It's we were quite surprised with some of the responses that came out of that. But I think that what was really strong was that consideration of fire, climate change impacts, ingress of water, impacts of water were all really high in terms of the concerns and requirements of those applicants.
I think one of our biggest challenges is about how we get everyone to collaborate. How do we get those industry leaders, those developers, those local authorities coming together and building these resilient homes? I think that's probably our biggest challenge.
Well, ever has it been thus?
Yeah.
We've been talking about collaboration in the building industry for decades, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it's about having shared common goals, I think, isn't it? That we want to, and that we make sure that, when we're prioritising our goals, we're not leaving behind other key issues.
Yeah. I want to move the conversation on to low carbon concrete. Everyone seems to be talking about low carbon concrete, and you said right at the start, we've had this solution. We've had it for 15 years, or even longer. I'd love to sort of get your idea of sort of what's been some of the barriers to that sort of adoption, but also what does low carbon concrete look like now in practice? Because I think there's a lot of confusion about what that means. Okay,
that's a very. How long have we got? That's very. That's lots of answers needed there. Okay, so. So I think there isn't one technology that says this is the industry have been decarbonising for years, and there's a whole within standard, so without even going sort of what I call off-piste into sort of low and deep green lower carbon concretes, there's a huge range of you make significant carbon savings by concrete that is in the standard tested, but actually not all of them have been available. And people would say, well, that's the industry just aren't supplying it. Well, there wasn't a demand for it. People weren't asking for it. You can make significant savings by just, swapping out some of actually by asking for a low carbon concrete. Yeah, basically.
And the performance
if you
in the install is no different.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's, concrete performance can vary enormously in terms of, it's designed and made to suit the performance that's required in terms of exposure and strength and class. And that's one of our challenges in the industry, trying to communicate this. There's not one type of concrete. There are tens of thousands of different types of concrete, different recipes, if you like. So actually all it means is when you're going in, it's like going into a baker's and saying, you just say, right, I want a loaf of bread. That's what's been happening. People have just been saying, oh yeah, I'll give you a loaf of bread. Now people are going, oh, I'd like a brown one, please.
Or gluten-free.
Or gluten-free even, exactly. So that's what's been shifting. So there's, and obviously people are asking for it, there's been more provided. So what we've been doing within the part of the work that we've been doing within MPA is working with standards to expand the range of those lower carbon options that are available within standards. So the first ones, God, time flies, doesn't it? I think it was about a year and a half ago. There was the latest revisions, a greater use of limestone as a supplementary cementitious material. So it means that you can still get the carbon savings, but use a little bit less GGBS, say, or fly ash, but in combination with limestone and cement. Brilliant. But that's I say that's concrete going semi-skimmed overnight. Right? You don't even have to engage with it, right? By doing that, because there's a demand for it. So what the industry is doing is then working at so I guess it's been there. People have either not thought that embodied carbon was important, or haven't been asking for the low carbon mixers. I guess that's the first thing. So people are asking for it, creates a demand, means more is available, which means carbon savings are made. That's not the end of the story. So there's lots of innovation going on into how to go deeper green and how to get those concretes that are a lower carbon concrete to be used more, and maybe some of them even to get them into standards, performance testing them, understand how they work. So there is and all of that going on while the industry is decarbonising clinker and Portland cement. So I think there are sort of easy wins now, transition technologies, carbon capture and storage. People used to think, that was one of our levers, important lever on our roadmap. It used to be like, whatever, sci-fi, not really scalable, is it? There's a plant up and running in Norway.
Yeah, Heidelberg.
Yeah, right now.
Yeah.
And actually really good. We're looking set to have the second one in the world in the UK.
Yeah. What I don't understand, though, is, and this is me probably taking a real simplistic view of things. Okay, the demand's there now that, that's there. Why don't we just switch off, the non-low carbon concrete? If the low carbon concrete exists, why don't we just say, well, that's your only choice now?
Because there is not just one low carbon concrete. I mean, a low carbon concrete, it's not as easy as just saying I want an A rating or a B rating, or a higher carbon concrete can provide you with the lowest carbon structural solution.
Right. Okay.
Right. That's one of the challenges, because it might mean it's stronger, which means it can be leaner, so you need less of it.
Got you. Yeah.
So it's probably a good job that I talk a lot, because there's a lot to say. But I think
it shows the complexity, doesn't it? This is a prime example of showing, there's no easy solution, and there's no easy way of communicating it either.
And no, exactly. And we try really hard to communicate it easily. But it's also a reason why it's important that people don't make knee-jerk reactions of just thinking, it's simple. I'm just going to wipe out and say no, nothing above a certain nothing of a low performance standards. They just ban them all, because actually they've got an important role to play. There are, as I said, there are thousands of different types of concretes, and what you've got to do is you've got to look at its use. You've got to look at it holistically. Look at how you can use concrete, but you don't measure concrete. Actually, if you're just measuring it by meter cubed, is really low in carbon. Oh, okay. Well, let's measure that then and use that as a measure. But that's not appropriate. It's about how much of it is used, where it's used, how long it's going to last. How many times does that material have to be replaced over its lifetime? What other materials is, by using that concrete as a structure, you don't need to put on plasterboard lining. It doesn't need to be replaced over its life. So that's the measure, not the actual thing itself. So, I mean, there's
especially the locally sourced product. It's a locally sourced product as well.
Yeah, it's locally sourced, local jobs. And from a resilience point of view, I mean, we've been talking about climate change resilience, but actually resilience of supply and, the wider social value support of having an industry that does not rely on imports, because we don't. Something like about 95% of all the concrete that's used in the UK is not just made here, but it's sourced here. That's responsibly sourced. That is providing jobs. That's a really important social value role it's playing, as well as resilience to, UK as an economy and as a nation. Yeah. No, well, thank you for bringing it up. I should have mentioned that before. It's a common misconception. Most of the time people just want to ask about carbon or they'll be talking about resource efficiency and just assume all this stuff is being imported because most building materials are.
Right. Yeah.
But concrete is quite different from that. It is local.
That's why we have localised quarries.
We have local quarries and an amazing story there with regards to the support for biodiversity that brings to
rewilding.
Rewilding, but also, the role that they play in mitigating against flooding, tree planting. I mean, there's, these things, it isn't simple. There is no silver bullet. And there is, we've got to be looking at, there's no silver bullet with concrete. There's no silver bullet for the built environment. We need to be looking at all the different things that we can be doing. Yeah.
And I think it's a really exciting space, especially when we talk about innovation. You've talked there about sort of the carbon capture side of things, the amount of construction technology that's coming through. For what is a very traditional building material, there's a huge amount of exciting innovation going into that. I'd love to touch on some of the breakthroughs that's now happening on the recycling and reuse side of things as well, especially with recycled aggregates. I had Will Arnold on podcast a few months ago, and he was getting very excited about the possibility of recycling cement as well. I'd love to sort of touch on some of those.
Yeah, I'm quite excited about all of that as well. Yeah, there's circular economy thinking is becoming, much more having much more of an impact, I think, on people's decisions about what we're doing. We need to be reducing waste and actually not removing the word waste. It's a resource, right? That's what I need. Yeah, but we're really good in the UK at recycling aggregate. We're something like 3 times better than Europe. There's very little evidence that any aggregate is going into landfill. It's not a waste problem. It's used. I think 1/3 of all the aggregates that are used in the UK for construction are recycled aggregates. And they tend to be the higher quality aggregates. Yeah. So, there's lots of different, there's a lot, I spent again a lot of time trying to explain the differences between the different types of recycled aggregates. People assume that, you're talking about, the low grade stuff, it's got bricks and asphalt and glass and all, construction rubble, right? Yeah. But actually, when you're demolishing a concrete building, hopefully it's going to stay, you keep it up as long as possible. That's the most important thing, to reduce waste. Use it. It can last for hundreds of years. Let's keep that frame in place. But eventually, right at the end of its life, when that's demolished and crushed up, that's a high grade quality aggregate, which can be used to replace the need for other sorts of aggregate. But what's exciting, and I think that's the bit that Will was probably talking about, and that is interesting, is that there's other uses being found for that recycled aggregate, and part of it is in the separation process. I call it a deep clean, right? So you sort of deep cleaning, so you get back to that original natural aggregate there, which has more opportunity for being able to go back into mixes and being used in different places. So that in itself is a high grade aggregate. But the paste that was around it, it's not a paste, it's hard, but it's just called a paste, recycled concrete paste, that absorbs CO2. It locks it in. So there's a recarbonation potential, either whether it's as an aggregate or whether you separate it out and then use that stuff to make new cement. It reduces the carbon footprint of new cement, or it can be used as a SCM, used in the making of new concrete. Now that's really exciting. So that's like the waste issue, what might be seen as a waste, as being not only a resource reducing other resource use, but it's really doing a really good carbon function as well. So tapping into that natural process of recarbonation is where it's really exciting. And people are starting to accelerate that natural process as well. So they're sort of flooding it with CO2. So rather than wait for a few years for that to sort of soak up CO2, it actually, let's just flood it and let's lock that in early on and then go and use it back in construction, which is what we're always doing. We're always going back into construction, but let's do something else in the interim and make it work harder. And that's the bit that's really exciting. There's loads of different innovations happening there.
One of my highlights of Futurebuild is always, during build up, coming onto your stand and getting a glimpse of the amazing innovations that you showcase at the event. You've had everything from self-healing concrete, what are we going to see? You know, what's some of those maybe those things that are coming up that you're keen to, not to give any spoilers away? But
well, the trouble is we don't always know about them because there's lots going on behind. There is so much innovation happening. Sometimes we don't know about it until it's actually launched. You know, I think carbon capture is right up there. Obviously, there's still enormous amount of work going into different types of cements. You know, ways of calcined clay is it's huge. We've already seen now first supplies being provided in Northern Ireland. One of our members is producing calcined clay there at scale. That's a new.
For those that don't know what that is, what is it?
Oh, calcined clay.
Yeah.
So that is basically heated up clay, brick dust, right? Yeah. Waste brick dust is calcined clay, but calcined just means heated, right? It's used as a clay. It has cementitious properties. So again, NPA did some research that finished about a year ago, which looked at all the sort of reclaimed clay from quarries that were, when you dig them up with the overburden, what could you do with those? Heated them up, found out, oh, actually, you know what? It's got good cementitious properties. Leeds have been doing some really good research in sort of mapping out where these clays exist within the UK. At the moment, most of them are sort of imported if they want to be used. But finding where our local sources are has been one of the key bits of work. HS2 have been doing some really good work on that. So obviously, imagine big infrastructure projects, digging in the ground, digging out, as part of that. Oh, London clay. You know what? It's got some cementitious properties. So, we can get that back in and use it in combination with cement, clinker, Portland cement, and limestone. And maybe, be using those combinations means that you can really get that down, but without sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's still, tried and tested Portland cement, which is decarbonising. So, I'm rambling again, and I'm going to do this. There's so much to talk about, trying to work out which is the bit that's most interesting. But I guess the bottom line there is there's a lot of innovation. And as designers, we think, we need to know about this, or we need to specify that type of concrete. Actually, we don't. The really easy thing that we all need to be aware of is concrete is decarbonising. The way in which it's, the types of concretes that are provided are evolving and changing as we find new materials, as standards change. What we just need to do is say, I would like a carbon value of this, please, or within that band, please. And then it's up to the experts who have been evolving the concretes, who have been testing it, to say, well, in this part of the country, this is the right solution for you, rather than saying, I want it to be done like this. And especially if it's a long project. Yeah. Because the way we do things is going to evolve and change, and you don't want to be locking in old practice. So just say what you want, which is ultimately for it to be lower carbon, and then just discuss with the manufacturers and the suppliers, find out what the lowest carbon solution is for that type of project, for that solution. It might be different in the ground compared to what it is in the frame. Enable there to be some variety. It might be different poured in the winter compared to the summer. I'm going into detail now, but it's about that discussion and collaboration and understanding, and not making headline, not thinking we all know it all. We've got to collaborate.
I'd always like to wrap up by almost going back to the beginning, which was, you talked about the sort of 15 years ago you joined the Concrete Centre. You had a very clear roadmap there. You've achieved some amazing things as an industry. We're in 2025 at the moment. What does the next 5 years look like as we hurtle towards 2030? Ooh. But also, where do you want to see the industry in the sort of 5 to 10 years as well?
Wow, that is a really good question. I mean, as I said, over that, so even if that 15 years is evolved, it's gone from energy efficiency to embodied carbon to people. Now I think that we're in that stage where people realise there is no silver bullet, and you don't have to swap out the carbon to get those carbon savings. That latest Future Homes Hub report, stated that for housing. That, I think, is quite a pivotal shift in recognising that actually concrete's here to stay. We've had it for thousands of years. It's continuing to evolve. So I think concrete will continue to evolve. I think there will be shifting the way that it's used. I think that will be shifting the way we specify it, new solutions of how it can be used on site effectively, new MMC solutions in in concrete is going to come through. I think that carbon capture will have a role to play. We're already starting to see the carbon capture bit, but I think when we're looking at carbon capture and storage starting to make an impact, and that's, all the signs are that before the end of the decade, we'll have that within the UK. But I think then the next one on from that is actually carbon capture and use. So I think even storage is a stepping stone on the ultimate journey. And, a few years ago, there was a shortage of carbon dioxide for beer. Do you remember that? Maybe I don't, it was just like so random. We've got all this talking about the problems, and yet there was a shortage of edible carbon dioxide. But so actually, we need it as well, and we use it. So maybe there's a link there somehow. Oh, wow. So, if I had a crystal ball and I could predict it, I wouldn't be sitting there, would I? I'd be on a yacht somewhere, wouldn't I? I don't know. I think that I don't think we all know what Concrete 2.0 is going to be, but what's for sure is that there is absolutely going to be concrete. We know we need it. And it's just really exciting in terms of us all learning about how to use it, how it's being made, and we're going to need it because of the climate change impacts, as I said. It's exciting.
It is. I find it absolutely fascinating. I really do, and I've really enjoyed supporting and working, with the Concrete Centre over time. It's a privilege to be able to host you at the event each year as well. I think if people are listening to this and saying Concrete Centre, how can they support me if I'm an architect and engineer? I know that we know your members. We know that you're sort of a group of fantastic different companies, but sort of how is it you want to engage with the industry? What's the sort of the way you can help them?
Well, log on to our website, concretecentre.com. That's the first thing. Register. We don't spam anybody, which we work really hard to make sure that we're just trying to provide some useful advice. And if by registering there, what you do, you just you'll get a newsletter. You'll get the latest publications that we're producing, webinars that we do online. We're about to launch our sustainability series in the autumn. Fantastic. We run that every year, so it's 4 weeks of just new and updated resources related to different themes that are important for sustainability. Talk to us, engage with us. We want to know what's useful. We within the Concrete Centre are architects and engineers and civil engineers and sustainability consultants. We understand the language and the challenges, but of course we don't know everything. Engage with us. Tell us what you want. Tell us what we need. We can work. Do we need to do something in a different way? Share information in a different way. But just basically, I think that's the key thing. Talk to us. Engage with us. And log on to our website, and then you'll find out all the stuff that's going on when it happens.
Brilliant, and we'll put a nice link to the September events in the description here, so get involved.
Thank you.
With that. Elaine, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Good.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you.